Hi guys, it's Julia at the Mother Ranch. Today we're going to work on the Leda goat. This was actually the very first goat in this style that I ever did. Actually the very first portrait in this style at all. And before I forget, watch until the end. I'm having a big giveaway for the first 20 people. Yay! So let's get started. All right, this is all that you need to trace this painting of Leda. You need your graphite paper. Whoops, that's out of the frame. Graphite paper. Your watercolor paper, your tracing that you printed off from the free PDF that I sent you, a pair of scissors, what is this? Painter's tape, or you could use washi tape. You want something that is going to release easily from your paper. Got your tracing, and then a piece of cardboard. So the first thing you're going to do is center your 8.5 by 11 painting over top of, do you see it? Yes, you see it. Over top of the watercolor paper. And you can either kind of give it a line by using your nail. There we go. Doesn't that make sense? Easy schmeezy. Anything sharp would create that. And then I'm going to cut that out. Cut it out! All right. Does not have to be perfect, just so you have the basic shape of the paper. Okay, so then I like to tape down my paper. If you're using a watercolor block, this isn't really necessary, but if you're using a plain sheet of paper like this, it is. So kind of eyeball it so it's about even on the paper and tape it down. And this keeps it from buckling. If it's a 300-pound paper, it won't buckle, but if it's less, it will. If it's a 140-pound paper, it definitely will buckle. So this keeps it from buckling while it dries, and well, once it's wet, and then when it dries as well. It also gives you a really nice white border edge, which is great. It's pretty at the end. It's a little bit kind of like a matte effect. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Just tape it down on all 4 sides. And then the next step is to take your, if I can pick it up, graphite paper is very, very fine. All right, so you're going to see some of it is white on one side and dark on the other. That makes it super easy. This one is kind of dark on both sides. So if you're not sure, you can see it's shinier, right? It's shiny and dark on that side. But if you're not sure which side is supposed to be down, then take your pencil. Yep, that'll work. And just put a piece of paper underneath it and draw. And see that right there? That's what I just did. So in this case, it's shiny side down. And then your picture of your goat. Okay, center that on there. Now, if you want to, you can absolutely tape this down with some Scotch tape to the blue tape, or whatever kind of tape you've got. It doesn't really matter. This part down to the blue tape. That's fine. This is small. This is 6 by 9, and it just doesn't take too much to trace it. So using a pencil, you don't have to be perfect. You can if you want, but you don't have to be perfect at all. All this stuff is going to be, you know, covered over with paint and ink and all kinds of stuff later. Just give yourself some fuzzy edges, fuzzy little ear edges. Trace along with me. Place where you do want to spend a little bit more time are the eyes. Making sure you get the basic shapes in. These are the little whiskers, little eye whiskers, like eyebrows kind of. This is just giving you a suggestion, the outline, the basic outline. So much stuff is going to happen with this after, so you don't have to be perfect. Practice the art of imperfection here, okay? If you can. It's always good practice, I think. So much of this, so many of us, excuse me, really struggle with trying to be perfect, and really there's just no such thing, you guys. All right, back to a little bit more, take a little bit more time for the eyes. Get those little nostrils in. His little chin. Okay, that part is done. And if you want, you can always lift up the edge while you're still holding it down and look at it. Look at that. There it is. Easy schmeezy. Your final step before we start painting is to use your waterproof pen. I've tried a few. These are my favorites so far. It's called a Pigma Micron. It has archival ink and it is waterproof. And I've had a couple others that weren't as good and bled once I started painting. I would say that give it just a little bit of time, or stick it in the oven. If you're going to start painting right after you put the ink on, then go ahead and put it in the oven just for 5-10 minutes on 150 to make sure that the ink is fully dry before you start. So now that you've got your tracing down, you take your pen. Mine is a 01. It's on, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, on the end, on the cap of the pen. And go back over your lines, your traced lines that you did with your pencil. And know, again, that perfection isn't super important, because we're going to actually go back after this part and kind of refresh these lines. So it won't be the end of the world if you don't get them exact. Close, but exact isn't necessary. This step is not you don't have to do this step, but as beginners, you, depending on the colors you use, you may lose your lines in the watercolor. So the portrait I did is pretty dark. There's a lot of bold colors in there, purple and yellow, orange. And so it would be easy to lose your graphite lines in a painting that has that amount of color in it. If you're going to use baby colors, baby pink, baby blue, really pale yellow, it's probably not going to be as much of a thing. So if you already know you're going to use super light colors and you don't want to do this step, then don't. I think it's just helpful, particularly for beginners. Get that little smile in there. All right, so that's all traced, and on we go to paint. Your tracing is done and your paper has been taped down to a piece of cardboard. And now it's time to choose your colors and get them ready to paint with. You're going to hear me talk about tea, milk, and cream consistency in your paint. And if you think about it, you can realize that tea is very watery. Milk, I kind of think of whole milk, so a little more body. And cream is liquid, but fairly thick. I'm using Winsor Newton professional watercolors. You can also use any kind of water-based paint. Craft paint, acrylic paint, the kind of paint that you get, those little Crayola pans of paint that you get when your kids go off to school and they ask for watercolors. Those work. Any kind of water-based paint works for what we're doing here. Basically, we're just going for a milk consistency in this. So the colors I'm using are a bright yellow with some orange to deepen the color, teal, which is kind of a blue-green, orange with a bit of red to deepen the color, and purple on the blue side. If you have too much red, it'll be more violet, and I'm going for more of a royal purple. Of course, you guys can choose whatever colors you'd like. To choose your colors, you can just go by your intuition. You can choose your favorite color combinations in gardening or decorating or your clothing maybe. Or you can check out these color wheels. I will include in the description a link to this style of color wheel like mine. So to take a real quick look at this color wheel again, if you look in that middle circle, you'll see a bold vertical line, and on it it says complementary. So those are the complementary colors. You can turn that wheel to look at whichever color, two colors you'd like. In this picture, it's showing the blue-green at the top and the red-orange at the bottom. Next to each other, those are pretty colors. They're bright and vibrant when you place them next to each other. But when you're working wet and wet, like we are in this section of our painting, if they mix, they turn into a muddy color. If you're interested in that, that's just the tiniest tip of color theory. Tiny, tiny, tiny. So, yeah, I'll talk more about that in some upcoming videos. It's always a good idea to try this stuff out on a scrap piece of paper, whether it's watercolor or not. When I make mistakes and I end up messing something up, I'll take that, let it dry, and I'll cut it up into, or just rip it up into little squares, and I use them to try things out on. That way I know what's going to happen when, say, purple and yellow for this, in this case, go together. And you can see at that top right corner of his head that it's a little bit muddy, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world. So if you think about it, you'll realize pretty quickly that certain things go together. Certain things will mix nicely together. It's pretty clear, I think, to most people that orange and yellow will mix nicely together, that blues and yellows will mix nicely together. And in our case, or in my case, I don't know what colors you guys are using, but if you're using the same colors I'm using an orange and a yellow, and that mixes nicely. The teal and the yellow mixes nicely. Some of the weird ones, the purple and the yellow, or the purple and the green, don't worry too much about it. Put in a little color, and we can always go back and punch up one of the colors that you like later, and I'll show you how to do that later on. It's easy. On to the painting, yay! First step is to wet your paper. I like to use a fairly large brush, it's about 1 inch, and just keep dipping into the clear water. You can use a spray bottle on here. If you have a big piece, you could always use a spray bottle or a little water bottle full of water. And just keep going back and forth, up and down, until it is completely wet. You're looking for evenly glossy, no puddles. Look at it sideways, in the light sideways, to see if you've covered all of the areas. Okay, our next step, I'm going to add just a little bit of water. My paint dried out just a little bit while I was talking about all the other stuff. Make sure it's the right consistency, milk consistency. And all you're going to do is just drop color in. And when you do that, because your paper is wet, it's going to spread. There is no rhyme or reason to where I'm putting it. I like this bright yellow a lot, so I'm using a lot of it. When I rinse out my paintbrushes in between color, I have 3 different water cups. I use just ball pint jars. 3 different water cups, one for rinsing it out, the second one for really making sure it's fully out, and then the third one is just for plain clear water. It doesn't get dirty at all. So as you see, I'm dropping this paint in, and you can see it's spreading. It's going to spread beyond your borders, beyond your tracing, and that's okay. That's part of the fun. Different color now. This kind of darker orange. It blends in well with the yellow. If you put the orange and the teal next to each other, they're going to be a little strange. And we don't want to make mud. So pay attention to colors that will go together. I really like purple and yellow next to each other, so it's no big deal to put them together, and you'll see me doing it here. Right there, as a matter of fact. And it will create a little bit of mud. We can go back and play with that again later. I'll show you how. Or you can wait for the paper to dry just a little bit more, so it's not quite so glossy, and then you can put the colors next to each other, and then they'll just ever so slightly bleed together, but not nearly as much as what's happening right now. You're going to notice as I continue adding more and more color here that there are some places that stay white around where the eyes would be. I used masking fluid on the eyelashes of this portrait, and I don't do that now. There are other ways to get those white eyelashes in, and that's a lot easier than that. It's really hard to get masking fluid really, really thin, like the way you would want an eyelash. So I'm not going to have you do that in your version. it's gonna be easier for you guys. This wasn't my favorite way to do it. So next I'm going to add a little bit more water to my paint, and so it's more like the consistency of tea. And my painting is still pretty wet. It's not really glossy now, but it's still pretty wet. So I'm going back in and adding just a little bit of darker definition to a couple places, like the jaw, the insides of the ears. Just adding a little tiny bit of definition. My next step is to, with that same tea consistency paint, is to take some paint on my paintbrush, and for the most part I tend to tap it against my own finger. I'm using all the different colors that's in the painting, and because the background for the most part is still damp, the little dots are going to spread. You can see in some places they don't. It's no big deal. Here I am taking just a bit of clean water and erasing the purple splatters that landed inside that ear, and adding a little bit more yellow. You've completed another phase of the painting. Woohoo! Now, either let this air dry and go do something else, or turn your oven on to the lowest setting. My oven goes down to about 150 degrees. Pop this into the oven for about 10 minutes, and you can get back to painting as soon as it cools off. Next step is to mix a yellow and a little smidge of brown to get a tannish or golden color. It is not what I am doing. You are not seeing this as you look at that. For whatever reason, I have no idea why I decided I was painting this goat's eyes so dark. They didn't end up like that in the end. But that's what you guys should be doing. Also, this is a Nigerian dwarf, so technically he could have light blue eyes instead. Or maybe you're all about color and the eyes are purple. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. But if you're going for a natural look, Nigerian dwarf goats have gold eyes or blue eyes. So mix that color and follow your black line drawing to figure out where you're supposed to be painting that. You can leave the centers, which are kind of a rectangle, blank, because those will be black later on. Then using a dark color, it can be black, it can be dark blue or dark purple or gray even. You're going to fill in the nostrils and a little bit of the mouth. Goats often have what looks to be a little bit of a smile. It's very sweet. So darken up those lines, and again you'll have them on your outlined line drawing. So it should be pretty easy to follow those, and you can already see that little face is coming alive with just those few details. It's time to give some definition to the ears. This right ear, I'm just using a little bit of that purple, following along, in my case, the pencil line. In your case, you'll have a black line. Just that top edge. And to make it a little bit thicker at the base and a little thinner at the top. On the right one I'm using purple, on the left one I'm using that kind of dark orangish yellow. I'm mixing up my purple that I've been using all along and adding a little bit of blue, just going for a thicker purple, a little bit more between milk and cream consistency. That purple in that little puddle there at the top is a little bit too watery for me. So mixing that up, and then I'm going to just darken up that part of the ear. I decided it was a little bit too light for me, so I'm using that darker purplish blue to darken up that section of the ear. And then that same color, that dark purplish blue, that's between milk and cream consistency, to start outlining the eye. Give it a little bit more definition. So cute. It really brings it to life. I do have to say that, as I said in the beginning, this was the very first one I did, and my camera angles are much better now that I'm further along. In this one, the camera is straight overhead, so it's really capturing a lot of my hand. You learn as you go, right? So outlining these eyes, like you're giving them a little bit of eyeliner, and a little bit of those little short pieces of the eyelashes. Go on to darken the pupils. Remember, if you're looking for realistic eyes, they're going to be either an amber color or light blue for Nigerian dwarfs. And then the pupils will be black. Go back and darken up the nostrils, and then the little shorter eyelashes. So if you can see, I'm actually using little flicking strokes, starting a little thicker towards the eye, and then lifting my paintbrush out, up and out. And that creates a thicker line at the base and a little bit thinner line at the edge of the eyelash. I'm going to darken up the inside of the right ear using just a little bit of the orangey yellow color. Excuse me, the yellow color. And I'm just following my pencil lines, and you guys will have black lines to follow. So filling that all in with the yellow, and then I'm going to rinse out that brush and go back and pick up a little bit of the teal and put that at the base so it bleeds up into the base part of the ear. And as you know from our early part, when you get something wet and you drop a color in there, it's going to mix and flow and bleed together. And that's a pretty look. And then I'm doing the same thing with the left ear, darkening it up with some yellow. But I notice on that right ear that the teal is bleeding too far up into the top part of that right ear. And so I'm tipping it so it stops bleeding towards the top of the page. Taking away, using a clean brush, taking away a little bit of that green and just lifting the color off using a clean brush with just clean water. Not too much water, just a little bit. And then lifting some of that color so it doesn't bleed too far up into the ear. So going back and darkening around this little muzzle makes it a little bit more noticeable, makes the nose and the mouth come forward just a little bit. I'm going around and darkening up some of those green areas, teal areas, excuse me. So whatever colors you're using, maybe you like them when they're real faded, the way this one is, and maybe you want to add some extra definition. Either way is fine. Darken up the top of the nose with whatever color you have used up there already. For me, it was that teal color. And go on to do the space between the nose, the nostrils, and the lips. And make sure you include just a tiny bit under the mouth so it gives a little suggestion of his little chin. I'm just going around and darkening up the sections that feel right to me. There is no rhyme or reason. The edges of the ears, where they meet with the head, would be a little bit darker in real life. Of course, they would not be orange in real life, but I really love this purple color, and I've decided I'm going to go ahead and darken up the edge of the head so it gives some definition between the head and the background, and go ahead and darken up the whole face with that purple, that darker purple. Not the whole face, the purple area of the face, I should say. Continuing to darken up. Remember that this is just me. You don't have to do any of these steps. You can do different steps. If you think that it needs to be darker in other areas, then do that. So around the eyes, get it nice and dark. That eye looked like it was kind of floating in space there for a few minutes. So it still does a little bit, but as the painting goes on, it comes together more and more. Don't be surprised if you end up with this funny time of your painting where it's suddenly, it feels like it's never going to come together. Keep going. Push past that piece, because often on the other side of, oh my God, what have I done, is suddenly it works. It just suddenly comes together. So keep going and see what happens. So I've decided throughout this whole thing, as I got into this piece, that, oh, okay, I really wanted it to be darker. I like these colors, but I really wanted the whole thing to be a little bit darker. So you could see the difference between the foreground of the actual goat and the faded out, loose, that bleedy spot that we did earlier. You have to be able to tell the difference between the ears, say, and the background. Taking a little bit darker paint and darkening up those cute little lips. Just making those areas a little more noticeable. Base of the ears again. Around that muzzle. And following the line of the goat's edge,
giving some little squiggly lines. Lift up on your paintbrush as you go. Start off with the paintbrush a little firmer against the paper, and then squiggle, squiggle, and then lift up. And when you do that, it creates a thin line at the end. So just some little squiggly lines to suggest some fur, both in the teal and now in the muzzle part of the yellow there. More squiggly lines. This is not going to be super realistic, right? Unless, of course, the colors you chose were more realistic, but even so, there's a lot of fun in these colorful paintings. And suggestions of fur is all you need. People see it's a goat. You know it's a goat. Just continue to go around and darken up your areas. Those colors that you really like, that you specifically think, ooh, that's extra pretty. I'm going in and giving some little details to basically what would be eyebrows. I don't know that goats really have eyebrows. I guess they kind of do. It's not really eyebrows like ours, but they do have muscles there. And so some little details around that makes it look a little bit more real. Again, continuing to darken. Darkening, darkening, darkening. That is my only thing in this next little bit. With some darker paint, start to suggest just the edges of his chin. Now for some more details, just those suggestions of fur, little squiggly lines for the fur. Remember, you guys aren't going to have the white eyelashes that you're moving around. We're going to put those on after the fact, so you don't have to darken around those white eyelashes like I'm doing there. This is where I finally figured out that I didn't want the eyes to be so dark. So I'm going back with a little bit of the amber colored paint, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of brown, and lightening the irises. You guys will have already done that. Go back now and darken more around the eyes. The eyes are such an important piece that you really want them to stand out. Make sure that pupil is nice and dark. I'm using a dark purple paint. You can also use black, particularly in the pupil, but you don't have to. Either way, dark is fine. Whatever color dark you'd like to use. Here I'm just continuing to darken and define, adding little bits of sharper lines, particularly around the ears and around the muzzle. The brush strokes I'm typically using here are short little flicks. So again, as we talked about earlier, if you push down just a little bit and kind of flick and lift up at the end, it creates a line that's thick at the base, or thicker at the base, and very thin and fine, wispy at the end. So I'm going to add some little flower details. They're really easy to do, and it can be any kind you want. For this one, I'm just starting in the center and just doing petals around the edge. They're not going to be perfect, and that is okay. So that's what that little blotch at the bottom is. As I said, not perfect, and that's okay. Using the teal color, or whichever color you have, doesn't matter if, again, if it's realistic or not. For me, I happen to have something that was kind of greenish. I'm going to go in and create some little swirly vines and real basic leaf shapes. So a leaf shape, if you think about like a philodendron, a lot of people have philodendrons. They're kind of teardropped, right? Really, philodendrons are even more like heart-shaped. But these that I'm doing are kind of like a teardrop, fatter at the base, and again, lifting up with your brush stroke toward the tip. That's how I do mine. You can do yours as just a real simple line. It doesn't matter. They're not going to be super noticeable. Mostly the people are paying attention to the face and the eyes. So these are just for fun, just for decoration. And then I'm just adding little, you can see my hand, dot, 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 little dots to create a flower. Super simple. And then on this one, this is kind of, the basic shape is kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen a butterfly bush, but the flower part of the butterfly bush is, if it were laid flat, kind of like a long triangle. And that's what this is. Again, just little tiny dots. No real definition here. And now I'm back to darkening and defining. Okay, it's time for the pens. You need waterproof pens, and the type I use are microns, and I really like them a lot. Typically I use the .01 and the .005. That's the tiniest one you can get. And my painting, we talked about this earlier, is didn't have the black lines. You guys will already have these black lines, but it's nice to go over them and just give them a little bit more definition if you want to. If you don't, then maybe you're done, and that's okay too. So for me, I'm just going back around the edges and giving it some definition. Again, same type of flicking strokes, so it looks like fur, starting at the edge of the ear and flicking outwards. So I'm just going to go around this entire painting doing the edges and the little details, a little more definition around the eyes, around the muzzle, and then later you'll see going around those flowers as well. It's finally here. It's eyelash time. I like to wait till basically the end of the painting to get the eyelashes on. The dark eyelashes. You guys will be adding white eyelashes as well. And so I turn the painting so I make sure that I get the thick part of the eyelash at the eye, and again flick my pen out, up and out, to create that line that's thinner at the end. The longer the better, I say. No, goats don't have real eyelashes that look like that, but it doesn't matter to me. I like them like this. Continue on around the goat with the black pen. Little fine lines around the edges, some little squiggles inside the areas of color, kind of following the brush strokes that you used to create that fur texture. Define that little chin, and down the left-hand side with the edges down the left. Again, little squiggles, little lines. Here I'm basically kind of tracing the edges of the vines and leaves and then the flowers as well. Putting little dots and things inside the flowers to give it just a hint of definition. This isn't anything that's, it's not real precise. So little dashes inside those flowers, and then this flower here in the middle that doesn't have, it's just a flower, it doesn't have any vines or leaves on it. Just going around doing a little bit of the edges. I decided I wanted a little bit more orange squiggly lines underneath this flower, so I'm adding those here. Tiny bit of fur texture. So while I'm working through this last little bit with the pins, I wanted to talk about the white eye whiskers. If you remember, I was talking about earlier how I used frisket or liquid masking fluid to block those areas off, and how I wasn't real thrilled with them. You guys are going to use something called a jelly roll pen, and I'll link it in description. Or you can use white craft paint, you can use white gouache, and that's a type of watercolor. It's a type of opaque watercolor. I would say the jelly roll probably gives you the most control, and you can create those little whiskers around the eyes with that. If you want to do them with the marker and do them black instead of white, that's okay too. They'd be more noticeable, I think, in white, depending on the colors of paint that you used. So my painting here is pretty dark, so the white stands out better. So however you want to do it, either way is fine. And again, that same flicking motion that we did the eyelashes with and the edges of the fur with will create those whiskers as well. The whiskers are above the eye and below the eye, and if you're not exactly sure, look at a picture, look at my picture, or look at your own dog. One of the last little details I want to talk about is how to make the eyes more lifelike. And the last little thing you need to do is to add a little white highlight. And it's interesting, when I look at this picture now, I realize that the eye on the left has a little white highlight and the eye on the right does not. So add one on each side. Do as I say and not as I do. And that really brings those eyes to life. Hi guys! I'm excited to announce my first art e-course will be coming out this fall. I'm working on the art for it now, so I'll be able to show you in the next free art class in September. And if you follow my channel, I'll be adding it to my weekly vlog as soon as it's done, within the next week or two. It's in a mixed media style, like these. It's called Farm Girl Happiness. I started off drawing this laughing woman, and all of these other elements and animals, goats, horses, and more decided to add themselves to the drawing. I'm in the early stages of painting and recording it, and I'm super excited to share it with you. It's mixed media, which means anything goes as far as types of water-based paint, collage, markers, and it's going to be so much fun and affordable. I'm also giving you an opportunity to make half the purchase price back. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my weekly newsletter over at themotherranch.com so you can keep up with the release date, the affiliate program, and early bird specials. This is a 4-week e-course, and because the art is more involved compared to my free classes, it will be broken up into manageable chunks. I taught this type of class all last year, and the women who attended it had so much fun. And now it's coming to you. Once it starts, I will release a new part of the class each Friday for 4 weeks, and since it's not live, you can go at your own pace. You get a line drawing to trace, no drawing experience is necessary. So if you're one of those people who says, I can't draw a stick figure, I promise this really is for all ages and abilities. Okay, as I promised, it's giveaway time. I will send the first 20 people who take this free class a signed giclee artist print of Leda. All you have to do is 1, subscribe to my YouTube channel, 2, like this video and comment with a short testimonial below, and 3, subscribe to my weekly newsletter over at themotherranch.com. That's it. If you're one of the first 20 people, I will contact you for your mailing address, and you'll be receiving your signed print in the mail in a few weeks. I hope you guys enjoyed this free watercolor class. My next free class will be out on Friday, September 11th. Please subscribe and hit the little bell to receive notifications on new classes and fun ranch videos. And then share with your friends and your favorite social media pages too.